given the most remarkable, devoted service to the Queen, to my family, and to the country, and also to the whole of the Commonwealth.
What if the most shocking royal decision in modern history wasn't aimed at a prince, a duchess, or even a rebellious royal couple, but at two innocent children? What if the battle between duty and family finally exploded so violently that King Charles chose to draw a line that many believed could never be crossed? Because behind the polished walls of Buckingham Palace, whispers had reportedly turned into discussions, discussions had turned into reviews, and reviews had turned into something far more devastating. And when the final words left the king's desk, the shockwaves didn't stop at palace gates. They crossed oceans, shattered expectations, and reopened wounds that had never truly healed. Britain had witnessed royal scandals before. It had survived abdications, divorces, family feuds, and public betrayals. But this felt different. This wasn't merely another disagreement between Harry and the institution. This wasn't another chapter in the never-ending Sussex drama. This was about Archie and Lilibet, two children whose names had always existed in the background of royal conversations, suddenly found themselves at the center of a constitutional storm. And according to the growing whispers surrounding the palace, King Charles had reached a conclusion that would change everything. Inside Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere was said to be unusually tense. Officials moved carefully. Advisors exchanged documents. Meetings happened behind closed doors. Every detail appeared calculated. Every word seemed weighed. The issue wasn't simply family anymore. It was the future of the monarchy itself. Charles reportedly understood that whatever happened next would trigger outrage somewhere. If he acted, he would be accused of cruelty. If he refused to act, others would accuse him of weakening the institution he had spent his entire life preparing to protect. The king reportedly sat alone reviewing language connected to the future of the succession. On paper, it looked constitutional, technical, administrative, but everyone understood the emotional reality hiding beneath the legal wording. Archie and Lilibet were not anonymous names on a document. They were his grandchildren, blood relatives, children connected to generations of royal history. Yet, they were also living thousands of miles away from the institution that defined that history. And that contradiction had become impossible to ignore. For years, the palace had attempted to balance two competing realities. On one side stood tradition. On the other stood modern reality. Archie and Lilibet remained connected to the royal family by birth, yet their lives were unfolding entirely outside royal structures. No official duties, no royal training, no direct involvement in the institution itself. The longer that reality continued, the louder one question became behind palace walls. Could constitutional privilege remain completely disconnected from constitutional responsibility? That question reportedly haunted discussions for months. Meanwhile, in California, life appeared far removed from palace debates. Harry and Meghan focused on raising their children away from royal pressures. But distance did not erase royal connections. It merely transformed them into unresolved questions, questions that continued growing louder with every passing year. Then came the moment everything allegedly changed. When word of the decision reached Harry, disbelief reportedly arrived before anger. At first, it seemed impossible. Surely there had been a misunderstanding. Surely some detail had been taken out of context. But as the reality became clearer, shock reportedly gave way to something far more painful. Betrayal, not because of a disagreement over policy, not because of constitutional arguments, but because two children had suddenly become the focus of a royal decision carrying enormous symbolic consequences. Meghan reportedly watched Harry's reaction unfold in real time. The silence said everything. The expression on his face changed. The realization settled in. This wasn't speculation anymore. This wasn't palace gossip. Something real had happened. Something that directly involved their children. And that was where emotions exploded. To Meghan, the issue wasn't constitutional procedure. It was personal. Deeply personal. She reportedly viewed the situation through the lens of motherhood rather than monarchy. These weren't future constitutional figures. They were children. Children whose identities would now be discussed by strangers, analyzed by experts, and debated by commentators around the world. Back in Britain, Prince William reportedly received the same information through official channels. Unlike the emotional reactions unfolding elsewhere, William's response appeared quieter, more controlled. But that silence may have carried its own weight, because William understood something many others didn't. Every decision involving succession creates consequences that extend far beyond a single news cycle. As future king, William reportedly viewed the issue through a different lens. The monarchy wasn't merely a family. It was an institution designed to survive generations. Decisions couldn't be based entirely on emotion. Yet even he reportedly paused when confronted with the reality of what was happening, because behind every constitutional discussion stood two children who would one day read every headline, every argument, and every accusation connected to their names. That realization reportedly disturbed more people inside palace walls than anyone publicly admitted. The public saw statements, the family saw consequences, and somewhere in the middle stood King Charles himself, a father, a grandfather, a monarch, three roles pulling him in different directions at the exact same time. Sources surrounding palace discussions suggested Charles wrestled repeatedly with the same dilemma. Was he protecting the future of the crown, or was he creating a wound that would deepen an already fractured family divide? No answer seemed satisfying. No solution appeared painless. And then another moment reportedly intensified everything. Months before the public controversy erupted, a private royal gathering allegedly exposed a painful contradiction that had been quietly growing beneath the surface. During a formal family event connected to royal history and tradition, names connected to the future of the monarchy were acknowledged. Among them were Archie and Lilibet, but the children themselves were absent. The empty spaces reportedly struck Charles harder than expected. Suddenly, the issue was no longer theoretical. It became visual, visible, impossible to ignore. Two places, two names, two absent children, and one enormous question hanging over the future of the monarchy. Were these positions reflecting reality or preserving an illusion? That question reportedly followed Charles long after the ceremony ended. Advisors discussed it, officials examined it, family members debated it, and the more they looked at it, the more uncomfortable the situation appeared to become. Meanwhile, Harry was reportedly learning that conversations once considered informal were becoming increasingly serious. What had started as discussions now appeared to be evolving into structured reviews. The machinery of the institution was moving, slowly, quietly, but undeniably moving. And as tensions rose on both sides of the Atlantic, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about titles. It was no longer just about succession. The private confrontation finally arrived, and according to reports surrounding the palace, it was the moment everything changed. There were no cameras, no carefully prepared public statements, no aides hovering nearby to soften the tension. Just King Charles and Prince Harry sitting across from each other, carrying years of unresolved hurt into a conversation that neither man could avoid. Harry reportedly arrived determined to protect his children's future. Charles arrived convinced he had a responsibility to protect the future of the crown. The problem was that both men believed they were acting out of duty, and neither could understand why the other refused to see it that way. As the discussion intensified, constitutional arguments quickly became personal. Harry allegedly challenged the very idea that Archie and Lilibet should carry consequences connected to choices they never made. Charles reportedly insisted that their value as grandchildren had never been questioned. Yet beneath every explanation, Harry heard something else. He heard an institution placing rules above family. Charles, meanwhile, reportedly saw a son demanding permanent constitutional privilege while rejecting the responsibilities traditionally attached to it. The distance between their positions became impossible to bridge. When the meeting ended, no compromise had been reached. The door closed. Harry left frustrated and angry. Charles remained behind, staring at documents that now carried the weight of a decision he had delayed for months. But while father and son argued, the machinery of monarchy continued moving forward. Advisors finalized recommendations. Legal pathways were reviewed. Official language was refined. The process was becoming irreversible. Back in California, the impact arrived like a thunderbolt. Phones rang continuously. Messages flooded in. Friends, lawyers, journalists, and supporters all wanted answers. Yet inside Harry and Meghan's home, the loudest thing was the silence between them. Meghan reportedly stared at the official changes and struggled to hide her disappointment. To her, this was no longer about constitutional theory. It felt like family members drawing a painful line through the lives of two children who had done nothing wrong. Harry's frustration reportedly turned inward. He questioned whether his departure from royal life had unintentionally created the conditions leading to this moment. Meghan pushed back against that idea. She reminded him that their original goal had always been protecting their children from pressures they believed were unhealthy. But even that reassurance could not erase the emotional reality. Across the world, Archie and Lilibet's names had become symbols in a battle they were far too young to understand. Then came an unexpected development, a private call, a conversation that reportedly changed the atmosphere surrounding the crisis. Catherine reached out directly. There were no advisors involved, no palace officials, no strategy sessions, just a family member speaking honestly. She reportedly urged Harry to think beyond the headlines and focus on what his children would eventually inherit emotionally. One day, Archie and Lilibet would read every article, every accusation, every angry statement connected to this controversy. The question was simple but powerful. What story would they discover about their parents when that day arrived? That conversation reportedly forced Harry to pause. The aggressive response being prepared by his team suddenly seemed less important than the long-term emotional impact on his children. Rather than escalating the conflict, he chose restraint. The decision surprised many observers and immediately changed the public conversation. Meanwhile, Britain erupted into debate. Some people viewed Charles as a monarch protecting constitutional principles. Others viewed him as a grandfather making a devastating choice that would leave permanent scars. Television studios filled with commentators. Newspapers published emotional headlines. Crowds gathered outside palace gates discussing the controversy. Yet one image seemed to resonate more than any expert analysis: the absence of Archie and Lilibet's names where many people expected them to be. That visual carried enormous emotional power. As criticism and support poured in from every direction, Charles reportedly faced his own private struggle. Public explanations could clarify constitutional reasoning, but they could not erase personal consequences. Reports suggested the king remained deeply aware that Archie and Lilibet might someday judge him through the lens of this decision. That possibility reportedly weighed heavily on him. In the end, the constitutional argument may have reached its conclusion, but the family story did not. Relationships remained complicated. Questions remained unanswered. Emotions remained unresolved. And perhaps that is why this controversy continues to fascinate so many people. Because beneath the royal titles, official statements, and constitutional debates lies something far more relatable. A family struggling to balance duty, love, disappointment, loyalty, and forgiveness. The monarchy may have settled the issue on paper. The public may eventually move on to the next headline. But inside this family, the real ending has not yet been written. Somewhere between California and Buckingham Palace, between royal duty and personal affection, between history and the future, the next chapter is still waiting to unfold. And for those watching closely, the silence surrounding what happens next may be the biggest clue of all.